Or it could be because she got a seed in her ear, and they took the thing out. And it looked like a small tree had gone in and perforated her eardrum, and so she's been walking around like this for most of a month. But we've got her on treatment. We spent quite a bit of money to get her treated and improved, so hopefully she's going to be there. But obedience is huge. So this is my question for you is this: are you serious about obedience? Boy, if we could just be as obedient as Tess, that dog, huh? God would be really happy. But we are a little bit smarter than dogs, and we can reason things and rationalize things, and we can kind of have our own way, which dogs can do. But here's what we want to talk about. We want to talk about and ask you today, are you obedient to what God's calling you to do? I need to give you a definition of a word, and the word is consequence. Don't give it to me yet, Shelley. She's talking anyway. Not yet. Hold on. When you hear the word consequence, what do you think? A positive or a negative thing? You think of negative, don't you? Well, guess what? It can be either or. Here's a definition of consequence that we need to have in front of us. It's anything that happens, something that happens as a result of one of our actions that we do. So when we have a consequence, it can be good or it can be bad. But the point of it is, it's the result of our action, our choices. By the way, I need to point this out. Shelley, I don't know how many we have, but if you are at home watching, please sign in and tell us how many you have watching. I know we had a pretty good number last week, and if you're at home, please sign in and let us know you're there. I want you to take your tablets. That's my tablet there. I want you to take your bulletins. Take the back there where it says notes. I want you to take just maybe 60 seconds. I want you to come up with what comes to your mind first and write them down. 5 examples, biblical examples of disobedience. Okay? 5 examples of disobedience, biblical examples of disobedience. You go and I'm going to take a drink of water. Okay, go. Quit looking at me. Start writing. 5 examples of disobedience. Go ahead and write them down, Susie. 5 examples of disobedience. Help her out, Dwight. Some of you don't have bulletins, or else you're just not writing. Chris, where's your bulletin? Right away. Write. Got about 30 seconds left. You got 5 down? I'm trying to organize. I have a couple notes here I don't want to forget, so I'm getting them behind my tablet, my Bible. All right. Everybody got 5? Jamie, you got 5 already? That was quick. You have 3? Okay, what's your first one? Who? Steve, okay. I want, you give me a type of, I want a biblical example. Keith? The forbidden fruit. Boy, guess what? Ding, ding, ding. That is my first example that I'm going to go with. So very good. So the forbidden fruit. Anybody else? Now you understand what I'm looking for, Jamie? Junior. Excellent one. Lot's wife, when she was told, don't turn and look back. I should have used that one, but I didn't think of it. I did with you. I tried to write down the first 5 that came and use them in my biblical example, but very good. Don't look back. Disobedience. Jonah, that's one of my examples I think I have here. Jennifer. The golden calf, when Moses goes up on the mountain, okay, disobedience, very definitely, sure. And we've been listening to that, haven't we? I have a confession to make before I take any more. My wife and I were listening to Leviticus last night, and I had it on the phone between us, and I'm not sure where we fell asleep. But we fell asleep listening to Scripture. I guess we might have to go back and re-listen. Okay, Jason. Ding, ding. Another one of my examples. Very good. Anybody else? When we struck the rock twice. You guys at home can't hear that. Yes, Jack. Lukewarmth, the Laodicean church. Very good. In Revelation. Any others? Nancy. David and Bathsheba. Definitely David on right. Eli. Oh, Eli. overlooking what's going on there with his sons. Yes, the two sons that were priests. Good. And that's not on, I could have used that, but I didn't think of that one first, so I just went. So that's good. Any others that you have, your first 5 of disobedience? What was it? Judas? Okay, could be Judas and betrayal. Well, let's jump into it. Take your Bibles, and we're going to work through these, and we're going to have some fun. We're going to get the dust blown off your Bibles. 5 examples of disobedience. First one is the forbidden fruit. Genesis chapter 3, verses 1 through 7. You know the story. It's interesting, though, because Eve, when Satan confronts her, she said, we're told we must not eat from it, verse 2. And that tells us that she was, well, first off, she was not there when that command was given. But that tells us that Adam told her about it. So he has discipled her, informed her that we're not supposed to do it. And in this whole situation, Satan, he contradicts God. He calls him a liar. Verse 4, you must not surely die, or you will not surely die. God knows that when you eat it, you're going to be like him. So what is it? What happens? She's deceived. She's tempted. She took some. She ate of it. And then she gave it to her husband. And we read then that their eyes were opened, and they realized they were naked. They disobeyed God. I have one up here, the book of Judges. We're not going to go through the whole book of Judges this morning. But if you read the book of Judges, many chapters start, again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. Again, I'm just going to paraphrase, again, they disobeyed God. And you can go read the first chapter of many, again, they disobeyed, and again, they disobeyed. And it just continual disobedience on their part. We're not going to do that whole book, just so you know. Jonah, what does God say? I think that was yours, wasn't it, Jason? Jonah, go to Nineveh and preach against them. What does Jonah do? I'm out of here. He turns and does a 180 and books passage on a ship, and he starts heading across the Mediterranean towards who knows where, but as far as he can to get out of Dodge. Talk about disobedience. Okay, Numbers 20. That's another one you mentioned, Jason. God said, okay, they're out in the desert, and they're at Meribah, this big rock, and God says actually, Moses goes to God and said, okay, these people, they're going to kill me. They're going to lynch me because they're thirsty. The animals are thirsty. We don't have any water. And what do I do? And then God says, go and speak to the rock. Okay, very specific instructions. God says, go and speak to the rock. Moses decides, you know what? Speaking's probably not going to be good enough. Let's put on a show here. So he takes his staff. And what does he do? He goes not one, but 2 strikes against the rock. Now, it's interesting. When you read the story, God still allows the water to gush forth. Why? Because he knows that the animals need the water. But there is a serious consequence here for Moses. Because of your disobedience, because you didn't do what I told you to speak, not to act, not to strike. Because of that, you will not come into the promised land. 40 years of leading these people. And now he's told, it wasn't them, but after 40 years of leading these people, he's taken up to a high point and he's allowed to see it across the river. But God says, remember, you don't get to go there. Obedience, disobedience, it's a terrible thing. Incredible consequences. 1 Kings, this is the last one I want to give to you. And this to me is probably the most heartbreaking in this of my 5 and maybe in the Old Testament. In it we read that King Solomon loved many foreign wives, Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonians, and Hittites. The nations that God, in verse 2, told the Israelites, you must not intermarry with them. Why? Because they are going to lead you astray from serving me, from a wholehearted devotion. But it says then, nevertheless, Solomon did what? He held fast to them in love. Now get this. We are told that Solomon was the wisest man in the world, but verse 3 kind of refutes this. He had 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines. I thought he was a wise man. He's a wise guy, kind of foolish, but Jason and I have joked many times, we have trouble keeping one happy. I can't imagine 200 or 300 or anyway. But a lot of those were political marriages. But look at what it says. As Solomon grew old, well, let me look at the end of that, verse 3. His wives led him astray. His wives led him astray. Now remember, this is the guy that God appeared to him not once but twice. He had been serving God and he had been devoted to God, but as Solomon grew old, verse 4, his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not fully devoted to the Lord his God as the heart of David his father had been. And then it tells who he followed: Ashtoreth, Moloch. Moloch is the one that they did child sacrifices they burned to. Look at what it says. And it says he did not follow the Lord completely. Undivided following of God is a dangerous thing to do. Verse 7, on a hill east of Jerusalem, what did he do? He built a high place for Chemosh, the detestable god of Moab, for Moloch, the detestable god of the Ammonites. And he did this for all of his foreign wives. He built places for them to worship their gods in direct violation, in direct disobedience to what God had commanded. But he did it anyway. Look what it says then in verse 9. The Lord became angry with Solomon because his heart had turned away from the Lord. And as I mentioned, this is God who had appeared to him twice. What a heartbreaking story. Look at verse 10. Although he had forbidden Solomon to follow other gods, Solomon did not keep the Lord's command. He was disobedient. And if you read on, you see the price of the disobedience. The nation is torn asunder. Terrible things happen. The northern kingdom never has a godly man on the throne. And I think we can track it back to Solomon and him allowing these things to come into his life. Well, let's get a little more positive thing going here. And now I'd like you to give me 5 examples of obedience in the Bible. People that were obedient in the Bible. 5 examples. First things that come to mind, write those down on your bulletin there. Don't think too hard. Just think through the Bible, Old and New Testament, things that happened. Got one, Jack? You got them 5? Daniel and Caleb, good. Junior. Who? Abraham, good. Daniel, Caleb, Abraham. Noah, was that it? Noah? Paul, Jesus. We cannot throw the ringer in there. You can't use Jesus, okay? No, not allowed. Chris? Who? Mercy. Okay, give me an example. Who's in that, though? I need specific peoples. Mark, you look like you got something you're ready to say behind that mask and that long beard. Okay, that's one of mine right there. Yep, you got one. Did you pick up my notes before I came in, or been looking at my tablet? Great minds think alike, or demented minds, something like that, right? Isaiah, who shall we send? Good. Any others? I'm going to touch on. Okay, Chris. Paul. All right, and that's what you're going into. Paul has a whole bunch of them. All right, here we go. Let's look at 5 examples of obedience. This is from the Bible, and we'll start in Genesis chapter 6, and you can follow along with me. Noah, and this is actually should be verse 14, not 15. 15 gives us particulars. Verse 14 is basically this. God says to Noah, go and build an ark. In verse 15, he gives the dimensions. It will be 1.5 football fields long. And Noah says, what's a football field? Think about that. 1.5 football fields long. Wow. So, Noah, what does it do? What does he do? He doesn't know what an ark is. but he goes to build an ark. Look at Genesis chapter 12. This is a great one. And we mentioned Abraham, but in this one it is Abram. But look at this. The Lord said to Abram, who is later to become Abraham. By the way, just for fun, just a little, this isn't in my notes, but I just wanted to throw this out. Abram, his name means exalted father. Later he becomes renamed, rather, and he doesn't become, he's renamed Abraham, which means father of many. So God changes his name. But he says to this, God says this to Abram, leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. Now this isn't before cell phones and internet and all the conveniences we have. He couldn't Google the place. He couldn't hit maps and see how long it would take him. By the way, I looked, and it's like 700 miles across the desert, just as the crow flies. But he went with the path of the river, so it was much, much further. And God says, go to the land I will show you. He can't Google it. He can't research it. He can't check it out. All he can do is what it says in verse 4. Abram left as the Lord had told him. He just obeys. He doesn't say, but, I don't know where. He just goes. I love that obedience. 1 Kings 17. We did a series on this one. And I heard Preston say this already. He knows who this is. This is a strange command that God gives to Elijah. He says, go and turn eastward and hide in the Kerith ravine east of the Jordan. Okay, so Sandy, you were maybe in that area. Do you remember the Kerith ravine and east of the Jordan? It's across the plain and up into the mountains. He says, go there. Go and stay there. But God says, you'll drink from the brook, and guess what? I've ordered the ravens to feed you there. Talk about room service. Ravens who pick and eat dead things, and they're bringing the food to him. Your sources of water is going to be the ravine. That's the brook there in the ravine. That's your water source. No tea, no coffee, no energy drinks, no nothing. Water and the ravens feeding you. And what does he do? He doesn't say, but God, how are you going to do this? How's this going? He goes. He just goes. Boy, you might see a theme starting to happen. And Melissa's probably at home saying, why does he keep touching that button? It goes to sleep on me. And I know it says 2 minutes supposed to time out, but it keeps going to sleep on me. In Acts chapter 9, verse 11. There we're going to look at the New Testament. We've been in the Old Testament mostly. I just use the ones that came to my mind, the examples that came to my mind. But here we are. Saul, the persecutor of the church, the top gun in persecuting the church, getting them chained, led back, killed. And he's now had the encounter with Jesus on the road to Damascus. And we have this happening. Ananias, Jesus talks to him. He speaks very specifically too. Go to the house of Judas on Straight Street, and ask for a man from Tarsus. Look at the specificity of God's command here. Go here to Straight Street. Go to the house of Judas. Ask for Saul. He's praying. And we can't really blame Ananias, because he's not disobedient, but Lord, hold on. I've heard all about this guy. You know his reputation. But what does he do? If that's what you want me to do, I'll do it. The last one I want to use is back in the Old Testament. It's in Hosea chapter 1. And if you aren't sure where it's at, find the book of Daniel. And it's just in front, or just after Daniel. It's there at the beginning of the minor prophets. Hosea, it's actually lengthy. It's like 14 chapters. But this is a really strange command Hosea is given. Sometimes God does this of us, though, doesn't he? The Lord, when he began to speak through Hosea, this is what he said to him: Go, take to yourself an adulterous wife. Go find a woman and marry this adulterer. Find this woman who's going to be unfaithful to you. Hosea's like, wait, aren't you a holy God? And you're telling me to do something unholy? No, he doesn't actually even do that, does he? That might have gone through his head, but what we read is he goes and does what God calls him to do. Yes, Jason, you're right. Jesus is